Welcome to the Future Proof Leader Podcast. I'm Jessica Raypatch, and today I am honored to have Kari Sulenes. She's the founder of Heartwood Collective. Welcome, Kari. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. I'd like to open it up by just having you tell everybody a little bit about what you do and what your mission is.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. So I started the Heartwood Collective by a different name just about 10 years ago. And it grew out of a personal mission of mine that I like to now call helping workplaces become places of healing rather than places of hurt. And I was really fortunate around that time in my life. I was just graduating from my clinical psychology degree, and I met a venture capitalist, and we joined forces basically to create what became Heartwood Collective. And so their mission at that time was to support all of the founders in their portfolio in their mental health and well-being so that they would have the resilience to build thriving businesses. And that spoke right to my heart. And it felt like, our missions really merged to create now the foundation of the collective of coaches, healers, therapists, and consultants that do the work that we do in the world.
So you hear a lot of hype about mental health and making sure you're taking care of yourself. And we all hear those things, but I don't think we all act on those things. From a company perspective, do you see yourself getting a lot of companies coming to you wanting this assistance, or are you trying to emphasize it across organizations to actually make this a priority? What are you seeing out in the marketplace?
Over the course of my kind of short career in the last 10 years, I've actually seen three different faces. When I first started this work, the talk about mental health and wellness, especially in the tech ecosystem. So we work primarily in the venture-backed startups world. We work with venture capital firms themselves, as well as the portfolio companies. And what I was seeing at that time was that there were not people talking about mental health. I met one other psychologist doing the work that I was doing at the time that I started the business. And he asked that I not disclose that he was partnered with a venture firm doing what he was doing because of the stigma. He said, this is like something that we do like kind of under the radar. People come and see me, but then we never talk about it again. And I was like, ooh, interesting. We're doing the opposite, where we're putting a billboard up and saying, we're providing mental health to every portfolio founder here for a year, right? Which is like kind of really countercultural at that time. So what I was seeing then is that the portfolio founders, the startup founders, were so hungry for mental health support. They were burnt out, they were overworked, they were underappreciated. There's a bunch of research out there that shows that folks who start venture-backed startups already have a higher instance of mental health disorders than the general population anyway, and that picture actually might be what makes entrepreneurs great. In fact, we run a workshop called Superpowers and Super Struggles, which is essentially like how your mental health picture might make you a great entrepreneur, but also how it makes you kind of like a high performance vehicle. You need to do extra care in order to take care of the special cocktail of psychologies that make up an entrepreneur's brain. So what I saw was that founders were hungry for it. The venture space was not talking about it. Then COVID hit, and that totally turned on its head. We had a line around the block of venture capitalists coming to us and saying, our portfolio founders are struggling. We need to support them. And there was all of this money being poured into mental health and wellness. There was the kind of like hyper awareness that the isolation and the shutdown and all this stuff that was going on at the societal and global level was causing people to stress. And our business tripled overnight. I was the busiest I've ever been in my life. And I was so tired.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
But it was an amazing kind of step, I think, in the conversation about mental health. And now we're seeing the pendulum swing the other way, as kind of the dynamics in the market are changing. I think also just, especially in the United States, politically, the conversation around mental health and wellness is changing. We're seeing people become a little bit shy again about mental health as the road in. I say all of that as like, that's kind of the picture of mental health and wellness. What has happened for us over the last 10 years is that we have actually really put our stake in the ground and saying this idea of self-care is completely a myth. I just had a baby 4 months ago. And so I'm really like, thank you. I'm really like thinking about human development, right? And like watching my son grow up. And this idea of self-care is really in my head all the time when I'm with my kid, in that he cannot regulate himself. It's actually not physically or psychologically possible for a 4-month-old neuroregulate themselves. They have to co-regulate. So if he's upset, like he has to be close to me, and that's how he calms down.
Yeah.
Now, the like secret is that even though as we get older, we kind of get better at self-regulating, we sort of never get good at it. And so the idea of self-care, right, self-regulation or like self-resilience is sort of not a thing. Like we have actually developed since the beginning of time to be in groups, right? Humans become partnered often. We're in families always, even if they're not the ones that we want to be in families with. If we don't have families, we have friends, or we have towns, or we have businesses that we're a part of, or clubs or something, right? We're just group animals. Like we need to be co-regulated. And so that's the stake I'm putting in the ground around self-care and mental health and wellness now, is that we're actually interested in intervening at the systems level on this. We're interested in creating resilient systems. We're interested in creating healthy systems because our group membership is actually where health and wellness comes from, we think. And so we're also kind of throwing out the idea of self-care, not totally like, go get your nails done or go to the spa or something like that. Like it's amazing. Definitely do that. And also like true regulation of your nervous system is going to come in relationship.
I get that. So a couple things. So I have a military background, right? So the stigma of needing assistance for mental health, I've seen two things. So people have seen it as a sign of weakness, especially with veterans. Like, well, if you say you need mental health assistance, then that obviously means you're weak and you can't take care of yourself, or you're not tough enough to get past it or fight through it mentally and physically. But then I've also seen and heard many people say, if I request mental health, it's gonna ruin my career.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be plugged as someone like, and the applications that'll say, hey, have you ever had mental health assistance? Or especially for security clearance, like I've worked in the government before. These things are important to some people so that they're not attached to needing mental health assistance. That part of the house must be difficult to kind of break through. And like, how do we open up the conversation to everybody, to both sides? Is it a weakness that someone has reached out for mental health? Is it because they're like on the brink of a mental breakdown, or is it that they just need a little assistance on how to be optimizing their performance? The education, I think, should be on both sides. That was my first thoughts when you were talking, because that just like gave me like memories of, yep, it's a form of weakness. And then when it comes from like the self-care thing. So how do you handle the multitude of personalities? And when you come work with a company, and especially in tech. So I've been in the government for tech. I've been in communities where we're completely collaborative and we like thrive on that. But I've been in tech communities where they're very introverted and they just actually do really well on their own, or getting that space on their own is actually what they need to like recharge their battery and to think properly. So how do you leverage your system to kind of address the multi-personalities?
The tech ecosystem mirrors in a way the military. So even though I think the military is most famous for its stigma against mental health, although also one of the places where the greatest innovation is happening in mental health, which is also amazing. So kind of like both things are true at this.
Well, they're pushing it now. They're very supportive of veterans getting mental health now, but that doesn't change like a Marine. I was in the Marine Corps, from thinking that it's a weakness to do it,
Totally. So it's exactly the same. Not exactly the same. There's a similar shape in the tech ecosystem. And so if you think about the kind of gatekeepers in the tech ecosystem, right, the folks like you would be applying for a job, right, or assessing your security clearance in the military, those people in the tech ecosystem are the venture capitalists.
Okay.
And so they kind of hold the keys to the castle. And they also historically have evaluated the founders that are deserving of getting money and not deserving of getting money based on pattern matching and the kind of stereotypical pattern matches that they might have used in the past. And I also just want to say sorry to all the venture capitalists that are doing this differently. I'm using a stereotype right now. I know that there are so many wonderful, thoughtful people changing the culture here. The stereotype of venture capitalists, especially kind of in the old world of this ecosystem, was looking for a white male Ivy Leaguer who invented something in his basement and was scrappy and worked all night long, every single day, 7 days a week, never stopped, was relentless, and was willing to win at all costs. That was the stereotype of a founder. that was worthy of money. And so what we realized at the time that kind of I came onto the scene again 10 years ago was that at all costs actually was leading to the failure of businesses. And not only was it leading to the failure of businesses, but it was also leading to the holistic failure of the founders' systems. They were in full-scale burnout, or in the worst cases, they were dying by suicide. And so it became kind of like, this just doesn't work anymore, right? It's like, even from a practical, if I take out my heart of all of this and I just put a business lens on this, like, this doesn't work. 60% of startup businesses fail because of people-related issues. And part of that is because the founder just gives up. And so we said, listen, we got to go all the way to the top where permission happens, and we have to change culture there. Yeah. We're not going to convince the Marines, right, that it's not weakness. What we have to do is convince the people who hire and train the Marines that it's time for culture change. And then maybe, right, in 20 years, we're going to see the culture change. And so what we did is we started intervening at the level of the venture capitalists and their limited partners. So the people who invest in the investors, we started the conversation there. And I was on this roadshow talking to all of these LPs saying, like, listen, you wouldn't give your 16-year-old a Ferrari without insurance, without proper training, and without a guide on how to change the oil and rotate the tires, right? You would not do that. And that's essentially what we do with startups. We give them $30 million. They're like 23 years old. They're like, blazing hearts, trying to make a change in the world. And they have no clue how to manage the system that they have. And so, what we do is we provide mental health and wellness care to them to help them, like a user manual on how to manage their system so that they don't burn out, so that they know how to manage their psychology, because I like to call business building as autobiographical company building, because founders can't help but project their family systems and their internal psychology into the businesses that they build. And so, like, hey, we need help, right, to gain of that so that moving forward, they have choices. So to answer your question in a very long-winded way, the way that we started combating the stigma is actually to go to the top, right? And to make a business case for it. So with the LPs, with the venture capitalists, to say, hey, you all need to be supporting the mental health and wellness services for your founders, because without your permission, culture can't change, right? That power hierarchy will always keep us locked in this of seeking help as weakness, as long as the people who hold the power and the keys to the castle are allowing that narrative to survive. And so that's the work we started doing 10 years ago. And we continue to partner really closely with venture capitalists and LPs also to help shift that narrative. So yeah, everybody's different, right? The way that we regulate ourselves, the family history that we have, that makes us all unique. So your question around, right, I said, like, hey, self-care is dead, basically, and like you have to regulate in a system. That doesn't actually mean that you have to be social in your regulation. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, all of us aren't going to like call a friend and talk for hours about all the stuff that's on our minds, right? Some of us need to journal or stare at a blank wall or take a nap, or there's all sorts of different things that recharge our batteries. And that's a part of the journey in learning your own system, is what actually, first of all, does regulation feel like in my body? And how do I know when I'm on the path to burnout? And then also, what are those unique tools that are just for me that I can reach for when I need to come back to a state of regulation? So that absolutely, I think that's also an argument for having a therapist or a coach in a one-to-one capacity, is to learn that picture for yourself, because ultimately the expert you is you. And, I can't tell you what the toolkit for your burnout is, because it's yours and it has its own unique shape that's just based on your own experiences. So I want to say that, and then I want to put it in the context of the system, because I think that's actually an important nuance to all of this. So there's our own individual picture, right? And we're shaped by our families. I like to say the first organization we were part of was our family. And so we learned how to be an employee from our parents, basically. We learned how to be a leader from our parents. And so hopefully we also picked up other skills along the way, post-childhood, but that was the first exposure that we had to all of that. And that means that whatever system we become a part of, we actually are already primed to absorb the culture of that system. In fact, I was just prepping for a group that I'm working with tomorrow, and feeling, as I was working through this kind of anxiety about sharing what I think I see in the system with them, And I
Mm,
had to ask myself, like, is this because I'm anxious about, public speaking or putting myself out there? Or am I feeling some anxiety that's actually part of the culture of their system? So I have to ask myself, like, as I get connected to this system, I actually kind of absorb the implicit rules and norms of this system inside of me, and then I start behaving like them. And like, this is a normal human thing we do, right? Like when
yeah,
we walk into a church, we behave really differently than we walk into a rave, right?
right.
They're like two different cultures. And as humans, we're actually designed to absorb those rules implicitly really, really quickly. That also means that I can be a very regulated self-care being and walk into an organization that has a burnout culture and burn out. And
Yeah.
it has nothing to do with, how many naps I take, or if I take a cold shower in the morning, or, I ran 6 miles before work every day. I could be doing all the self-care stuff in the world and still get burnt out because I'm a part of a culture of burnout. And so that's what I mean. Like, looking at the system is really important. And that's the kind of work that our group is constantly keeping our eye out for, is how can we help that system move from a burnout culture, right, or a system of hurt into a system of healing, so that then the individuals within it can also thrive. And that also means when the individuals are thriving, then the group also thrives, right? And then the company is successful. So when we can line up that individual, group, and organization stack, that's when we start to see really successful businesses with thriving individuals as a part of them.
I feel like we all have friends that when you hang out with your friends, you have the one friend that's always positive, happy. I always call myself like an aggressive optimist. I'm always like, yes, we got this, guys. We're no one's dying. Like, we're not dodging bullets. Like, this is going to be fun. Even if it's not something we want to do, it's going to be fun. Let's make it fun together. But then when I get in a group, we all have that one friend that kind of like everything is like a negative problem or an annoyance, and the energy shifts quite drastically. So I hear you're saying you do an individual, team, and then, overall group. What does that look like looking for you? Is it like individual one-on-one sessions that lead to group sessions that lead to company meetings, or like explain how that works?
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to explain what we do into two different scenarios. So there's like, how do we do it right now? And then I'd also love to share with you how I think that our work is being shaped by AI
Oh,
and how we're adapting the way that we're responding to organizations,
yeah.
because the world is different, literally hour by hour right now.
Yes. Yep.
So,
I love it.
so when we started this organization, we were always thinking in terms of systems. But over the last 10 years, we have evolved what we call a core system. And that's the way that we work with companies. So we're always working at the one-to-one level. So we offer a group of coaches, usually to an organization. It might be easier to imagine this with kind of a scenario. So, imagine a 40 tech business. So they're relatively new. They're maybe going into their Series A or just raised their Series A, and they're about to explode in a good way, right? So they're about to move into the scaling part of their journey. That means they're going to go from 40 people to 150 or something like that. This is a typical that we might get involved in a company. And usually what happens is we start by coaching the CEO. Usually that CEO says, wow, this was so helpful. I would love to get some coaching for some of my lieutenants. So then we start coaching the C-suite. So then the whole C-suite has a coach, individuals. Then the C-suite folks will say, wow, I think that my VPs really need this support. So then we'll start coaching some VPs. And then the VPs will say, how do I get this kind of training for my managers? I don't really see that they have what it takes yet, or especially in startups, oftentimes people are promoted, say, straight out of school, and they end up in leadership positions for the first time in a quickly growing business. So they say, how do we get these people support? So this is usually how the one-to-ones grow, right? So then we're, say, coaching people at almost every layer of the organization. At this point, we would say we are coaching the system because we have a view of all of the different layers. At this point, we would add what we call drop-in coaching. It's kind of like, think about it, office hours for anyone in the organization. So what we want to do is actually offer the coaching benefit to anybody in the company. It's common for leaders to get one-to-one coaching paid for as a part of their membership in a business. It's very unlikely that, say, an IC or even a manager would have any dedicated coaching for themselves. We think this is a mistake because every member of the organization has a critical part to play. And like we were saying earlier, like the culture upheld in a billion different ways. And if you want to create culture change, you have to pull it all the way through the layers of the organization. So this kind of spread of one-to-one coaching relationships is pretty critical for the work that we do. Then what we do that's different than kind of any other coaching firm that would come in and coach everyone in your business is that we are anonymizing and collecting data from all of those coaching relationships. And that means that even though it's a completely confidential coaching conversation, right? Nothing that the folks share with our coaches goes anywhere in any identifying fashion, but we're extracting from those cultural insights about the business. And then we use those to reflect back to a group of culture champions, usually including the CEO, some key leaders, and maybe folks who are working in culture specifically. We use those insights to then reflect back to them what we see happening at the organizational level. And then it's like our next coaching client, which is the system itself. And so then we're having ongoing coaching conversations with the system itself. And we're saying, hey, you said that you really wanted to be an autonomy-driven culture. Here's how this is actually going. And then we start to kind of work that edge. And that's what we call our core system. And usually we also call ourselves long-term relationship people. So we're not like a one and done kind of consulting firm, right? Like if you were going to call Deloitte and they were going to come in and interview a bunch of people, give you like 160-page report, and then say, here's some recommendations, good luck, go do it. That's not us either. So we're not like a one-to-one coaching firm, not like a big consulting firm. We're sort of like a marriage of coaching and consulting, and we'll start to do that work over time. So that's the system we've developed. And can I tell you how we're going to bring that for? I'm really excited about the work that we're hoping to do as AI takes more hold in businesses. I'll give you kind of the landscape of what we're seeing with our clients.
Sure.
And I would say we have the full spectrum. We have clients right now who are like, AI, what is it? We're not that interested. And they're kind of doing things the way that they've always done them.
Yep.
I think that will stop working very soon, but we still have some people who fall into that camp.
Yep.
We have some people who are in the middle, who are like kind of AI curious, who are they're empowering their people with AI, right? And really taking that kind of partnership approach. And then we have a number of businesses that we work with who are moving quickly into AI native territory, and even a couple that started their businesses with AI agents as their primary delegation pool. And so we're looking at companies that typically would have been, say, like 80 to 100 people that's 7 people that are managing agents.
Okay.
So I'd say we're working on the full spectrum right now.
Yeah.
And obviously that whole thing that I just told you looks really different if all of the ICs are AI agents, right? We're not going to do one-to-one coaching probably. I mean, this might be a whole nother future thing that I have not yet totally grasped. And we can talk about this in 5 years, you can have me back on the podcast and we'll talk about coaching AI. Because AI is now having mental health disorders or something. Right. But as of right now, that is not our plan. But obviously it looks really different, right? In a kind of organization where there really isn't an IC layer to speak of. And something that we've been observing with the companies that are really moving more quickly into AI adoption is that the problems that we see in businesses that are not adopting AI are happening faster and bigger. And so we started asking ourselves the question, why is this happening? And here's what we came up with. Like, I reserve the right to edit this as we get more experience because everything, like I said, is changing so quickly. But what we're seeing so far is that in a human-driven system, there's a lot of friction. People disagree, people can't make meetings, notes are sloppy, people forget things, folks get in conflicts and are having full-on arguments in the middle of meetings, all sorts of stuff, right? It's messy. Humans are absolutely a disaster when they try to get together. Like, we need each other, but also like, man, it's hard. And anybody who's ever been married knows that intimately well.
Right.
You're like the best person in my life and also the worst.
Yeah.
So, humans are messy, but we're starting to form the opinion that actually part of that mess is really important for innovation and productivity, in that it's almost like you are going to, I don't know, like, did you ever like tumble rocks, like polish rocks?
We have a rock tumbler.
Because if you had like a rock that was going through a river, say over 50 years, right, and becoming like really nice and round because it's like bumping down the river, I think of that as like the organizations of 5 years ago. Like it took us a long time to do things. There was a lot of like bumping up against each other, refining ideas, people quitting, all sorts of stuff that was like helping to really whatever it is that we're working on. Now we come up with an idea. We say, I would like to have this rock. And then we go tell our AI agents to go build it. And then within a couple weeks, the thing is built. Yeah. So what used to take us, 50 years down the river is now taking us 2 weeks, right? With all of these AI bots. And what I would say is like, it's amazing to create efficiency, but we also lose something when we create efficiency. We lose kind of that pressure testing, right? That refining, that the thing a rock tumbler does, right? That agitation on purpose. Yeah. And so what we are doing, we're calling them coherence sessions or tuning sessions, is to help leadership teams agitate on purpose. So all of that stuff that used to just happen in organizations because humans are a freaking mess, we now have to do on purpose, right? We have to have conflict on purpose. We have to push back on purpose. We have to create space on purpose. And so that's what we're doing, is essentially helping leadership teams to get so aligned that whenever they put their idea into the hopper that then becomes the mandate for their fleet of agents, that idea is so much more refined and so much more ready for execution than it ever had to be before. And that means that people have to be more aware of themselves. They have to be more courageous in their conflict. They also have to be more sensitive in sensing the market and the needs of people and all of those things. Like anything that makes us human, we have to be 10 times better at it now than we used to be. And so that's what we're up to. That
is cool. And I do want to be back to hear about how that is going. We are, if you've watched our podcast before, like we're pretty big on not replacing humans with AI just because of what you said. The effect, I love your analogy with the rock tumbler. But it's just that rock where it even starts, like it tumbles in, like as it tumbles, it has a plethora of knowledge base on that industry, on that company. Someone that's been with the organization for 30 years is going to give us insights that AI never could. And if you're using AI, but you don't really know how to do AI prompting correctly, you're not going to get, the results that you're looking for. And I think that you're exactly right. We see companies that are like, oh, I'm not touching AI. I'm not ready for it. We're not really ready for it. Those companies are like, you have to be curious. You have to start because you're going to be behind or you're already behind. And then the companies that are being innovative but not making moves, it's like you need to figure out what you want to do. What is your goal? And really make everything efficient before you even embed your AI. And then the hard charging companies, I feel like, are making the biggest mistake if they haven't done the research and they're firing a bunch of people. Everyone's losing their jobs. Retention is going to be a big problem with them because I think AI will be like this. It's always going to be like the world has been. Everything comes in ups and downs. But when you fire all your staff and replace it with AI agents, I think that it's going to be really hard to build your company back up when you realize that those AI agents were cool at first and they saved you a ton of money and time, but they can't tell you what Karen knows after working for the company for 30 years. Where can companies find you? So obviously this is a thing people should be investing in, right? Like anybody knows. I've had a couple corporate and company culture representatives and companies on the podcast lately. And it's like blatantly clear that when you have a company that is working together, open communications, understanding their pitfalls and working on those and being more collaborative, they're being a lot more productive. So where can people find you if they're looking for your services?
Yeah. So we have a website. It's called thehwc.com. Stands for the Heartwood Collective.com. Mm-hmm. And there is a link on there. It says find a coach. That is just a complimentary 30-minute conversation. We actually love to talk to people about literally anything, even if they're not interested in working with us. So love people to reach out that way. That lands right on my calendar or my colleague Sandy's calendar. And we're down to talk with anyone about anything in this world. Nice. So that's a great way to find us. We're also on LinkedIn. You can find me directly on LinkedIn, Kari Sulenes, or also the Heartwood Collective is also on LinkedIn. That's a great way to get in touch with us.
Amazing. Well, Kari, thanks again for being on the podcast. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. And until next time, we will see you.